At this point, we're about to get into Photoshop to work on the Cityscape project. But before we do that, I want to explain some fundamental differences between Illustrator and Photoshop to help you understand what we're doing to continue with the Photoshop project. Here we are in the useful information presentation, and this presentation goes through some basic facts and information about the different programs and file types that we use. The first thing that we want to talk about is rasters versus vectors. So you'll see that raster is graphics made with pixels, and vectors are graphics made with shapes and lines or math. You'll recognize the vector shapes because of the handles, and we already worked on those in Illustrator. Illustrator is a program that uses vectors, and you remember these handles. This is the tiny circle, and then when you blow it up, it's the exact same circle. The same lines are determining the shape, and you can resize this vector circle to any amount, and you'll always have the exact same circle. Rasters, on the other hand, are made with pixels. Pixels are little squares, and they're usually tiny enough that you can't even notice that they're squares. But sometimes you don't have enough of them, and when you try to blow them up, you get this like fuzzy square look that you will associate with bad graphics. So you see that this is the tiny circle, and then when you blow it up here, it looks all pixelated. And this shows you how the circle is made out of these squares. So rasters cannot be enlarged or zoomed into, or they'll become pixelated. Vectors can be resized to any size. Here's an example with the Twitter logo. You might recognize this little bird. So this is the vector image at 100%, and this is the vector image resized at 300%, and they look exactly the same. Bitmap is a synonym for raster, and you see that this is the bitmap, it's 100%, and then when you zoom it into 300%, it looks all fuzzy and pixelated. So then one might wonder, why do we ever use rasters or bitmaps if we could be using vectors and then we can resize things? The answer is because you can capture a different kind of picture or image using bitmap or rasters than you can with vectors. So this cat right here is a bitmap or raster picture, and it's photographic. It's a photograph. You can capture millions more colors and have much more gradation and just a different look than this vector image, which is cool, but it's got a very, graphic, feeling. The colors are in color blocks, as opposed to in this side with the bitmap, the colors gradiate much more. Your camera lens will take a picture in a raster format. So pictures are captured in raster. And that's one of the reasons you would use raster, and you just need to make sure that you take a picture that's big enough that you can resize it down, but you don't have to worry about resizing it up. So to go over it, rasters are photos and graphics with set sizes. So if you're going to save your logo, then you want to resize it to the size that you actually need it, and then you can save it as a raster. And then a vector would be a logo, icons, text. You can think of your phone apps. Those were all originally designed as logos, as vectors. So to go over the programs that you would use each of these in Illustrator, we would use vector graphics. We did that with the letter image project. And in Photoshop, you would use raster graphics. And we'll get to this when we do the next project. But InDesign is a place where you can use both raster and vector artwork. Now let's talk about the project files versus the export files. So Photoshop, when you save a Photoshop file, it will save as a .psd file, and you would primarily be exporting things as JPEGs, TIFFs, or PNGs. We already know this from the letter image project, but when you save an Illustrator file, it saves as a .ai file, and you would primarily export your Illustrator file as a PDF, a JPEG, or a PNG. InDesign will save as an INDD file, And we're going to be exporting it as PDFs, although you can also export as PNGs and JPEGs, but we'll get to that. Another concept to talk about would be lossy versus lossless. Lossy is information from the image is deleted and colors are averaged to save space. So you can think of this if you have a suitcase and you don't have enough space in your suitcase for all of the stuff you want to pack, you have to start getting rid of stuff. That's your lossy file, and it's just to make sure that it's, light enough that you can bring it on the plane. Lossless is an image that preserves image quality and it takes more space. So lossy files would be JPEGs, TIFFs, and PDFs depending on how you save them, and a lossless file would be a PNG, a TIFF, a PDF, a GIF, and an SVG. Here is a chart that helps you, it has the information of what's a raster, what's a vector, when it's saved, which ones are lossy and lossless, and the pros and cons of each file and when you would want to use them. Going forward in our project, we're going to be creating a pixel-based Photoshop project using the selection tools, and I hope that this presentation helps you understand the kind of artwork we will be making.